Saluti a tutti, and welcome to this episode of Ciao DMV, Italian-American Life in the DMV. My name is Joseph Barone, and I will be your host. This podcast channel is dedicated to all things Italian and Italian-American in the DMV, aka DC, Maryland, and Virginia. My focus is on the Italian-American experience, from family stories to little-known history to businesses to cultural events, etc. Today, I am pleased to present to you part one of my interview with Tom Stallone, veteran and business development leader. I met Tom when I joined the Lido Civic Club a few years ago and was impressed by his networking skills and his work navigating U.S. federal government contracting. In fact, I did a series of episodes in March of 2023 with him on federal contracting on my Foolish Thoughts podcast. And by the way, you can still find those episodes on all major podcast sites. So sit back and enjoy listening to Tom tell his story of growing up in Ohio and Pennsylvania, his time in the U.S. Navy, and as a business and development leader. So, Tom, thank you very much for agreeing to be on my interview on Ciao DMV. So, Tom, can you tell me, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Columbus, Ohio. I have a twin sister, and as an aside, both my twin sister and I and my younger brother, all three of us were adopted by my parents who couldn't have children.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, not a lot of people do.
And there's a huge Italian presence in the Columbus, Ohio area. So, were your parents of Italian? Were the parents who adopted you of Italian descent?
My father was.
Okay.
My mother was Irish and German. My father was Italian, and his family was from Bari, Italy.
Okay. And have you been to Bari?
Yes, I have. I've been there 3 times. The last one was almost 10 years ago, and I've stayed in touch with some of the relatives over there.
Okay, that's excellent, because I think it's so important to do that. Although one of the things that people make fun of the Barese is they can't always understand when they're speaking Italian.
Dialect.
That is. What was life like for you growing up as a child? And did you grow up the entire time in Columbus as a child, or did you move?
No, I grew up until about the 2nd grade in Columbus, Ohio area. And then we moved back to my father's hometown in Pennsylvania, Franklin, Pennsylvania. And it was an interesting place to live. My uncle had a plot of land. My grandfather had a plot of land. My 2 aunts and several cousins, and they were all in the same area, what was called the 3rd Ward of Franklin, Pennsylvania. And it was an Italian-Polish neighborhood, very, very much so, both at the ethnicities.
And growing up, what traditions do you remember? Some of the traditions that you remember growing up with?
Well, some of the most fun were Easter, and the Easter bread and the homemade treats, and then Christmas as well. And there were some things that deal with Christmas that are typically, I guess you would call Italian, including the La Befana, as well as waiting on extending the holidays. It just wasn't Christmas Day and New Year's Day. It was like a 3-week period to go visit relatives, go enjoy good food, go out and meet people and do stuff. And once my parents moved from Columbus, Ohio, back to Franklin, PA, I distinctly remember one of the things is every Wednesday, my dad liked to go to Novena. So we go to Novena, and then we go over to where my aunts and my cousins lived and spend an hour and a half, 2 hours over there.
Wow, that's a great memory. And did you guys do the 7 fishes and visit the 7 churches at Easter and all of that sort of stuff?
We did the Feast of 7 Fishes. We didn't do the Easter, so much Easter, but definitely Christmas time and the Feast of the 7 Fishes. In fact, we still carry on some of that today.
Oh, okay. So with your family, you continue to carry that on?
Up until a few years ago. Now my children both kind of moved away, but up until them moving away, yeah, we used to do our own version of that, especially Christmas Eve.
Lots.
In fact, you're sitting in my dining room over there in my living room. We'd take all the furniture out. We'd put a table. We'd have 21, 25 people
That's
in there.
wonderful. That is a wonderful memory. That must have been some great times with 21 people here.
Oh, great. Plus occasional nephew on the roof in a Santa Claus outfit. So yes, we had some great times.
Well, good. And so you grew up in Franklin, and then after you graduated from high school in Franklin, what did you do? Where did you go?
I went to Westminster College,
Okay.
and I went down there, and basically I played football and drank beer for 2.5 years, and I decided I need to get my stuff together. So I then went in the Navy. I did an interview with several of the armed services, decided I wanted to go in the Navy and volunteered to do two things. One was to be a submariner. The second was to dive. And I did both of those. I'm not ashamed to admit for $45 extra a month. So it was an extra $90 a month above my base pay that I was making to do those two things.
And so why did you decide to be a submariner as opposed to, let's say, being on a destroyer or aircraft carrier or doing something else?
Well, I told you I went in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't tell you is I get viciously seasick. And my thought process being submarine going under the water, I'm not going to get seasick. And that was true most of the time. However, going out of the straits out of New London, Connecticut or Groton, Connecticut in the wintertime in particular, those were some rough rides going in and out of port up there.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically wear a little patch underneath your ear. And I don't think I can call it what I would call it at the time, but it was a pea patch, we'll just say, that you could tell who got seasick and who didn't. Because I give one of my captains a lot of credit because he always wore a patch just so nobody in the crew would give each other crap.
Okay.
He wore one, and I don't think he needed to. I think he did it just to set an example.
Mm-hmm.
I always admired that.
And were you the whole time a diver and submariner, or did you do other things while you were in the Navy?
No, I basically, I did it in different parts of the country, but I was in Groton, Connecticut, and then I was in Jacksonville, Florida for a very short period of time. And then I was stationed out in out on the West Coast outside of Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
And that's the big Trident, big submarine bases are Kings Bay, Groton, and then out on the other side of Seattle.
Yeah, I've been out there and have seen on the bay the submarines coming in and out. With my Boy Scout troop, we go out there to camp and hike at the national park out there. But we did go up to out in that area. There's a famous lighthouse that you can go out, you can hike out to, you can even stay out there for a week if you make the proper arrangements. And we would see the ships, the boats coming in and out. Do you have a fond memory of your time there?
Oh, I had a lot of great times in the Navy.
Well, which ones that you can share, maybe?
No. Well, one of the things, because of my personality and my size, I guess, is particularly when we were on patrol, halfway night's a big deal. And what halfway night is, that's halfway, the patrol's half done, you're halfway ready to come back. So usually there's celebrations, Christmas parties, big birthday parties for multiple people. So the halfway nights and the skits and the gags and stuff that would go on associated with that were pretty much very fond memories. And I still have a couple of close shipmates that I stay in touch with, and we tell those stories over and over again every year or two when we get together.
Hopefully you've told some of them to your kids so that they can remember those stories.
Yeah, some of them,
not all of them.
Not all of them.
So back then, I know today, but back then, when you went on your first, I guess it's called cruise, if that's correct, you had to also pass a test. You had to get to know all the different parts of the ship, and then you had to take a test in front of, I guess, the petty officers or some of the other officers. Was that true at that time?
Yeah, what that is that's called the submarine qualification. And basically what you're alluding to was what's called the qual board. It's one officer, one chief, and at least two enlisted people. And everybody on a submarine You don't call the fire department on on a submarine. You don't call for help. You have to be able to do basic damage control. And really, except for the reactor, that's what that whole thing, that qualification process is. So anybody, and no matter what part of the submarine you're on, with the exception of the nuclear engineers, you can pretty much handle basic minor emergencies, everything from fires to floods to all kinds of different things that might happen.
Mhm. Okay. Thinking back to that time, now you served what, 11 years and then you got injured, is that correct?
Yeah, I was running to a casualty through one part of one compartment to the other, and one of the yardbirds, one of the people that works in the yards, had left a bucket that contained some solvent in it. That had spilled and got on the floor, and I slipped on that, and I fell, and I cracked 2 vertebrae in my back. So I actually retired out of the Navy as a service-disabled veteran. In fact, now I'm currently rated 100%. And as long as I keep my weight down, it doesn't bother me very much. But when my weight comes up, I definitely notice that I definitely have some pain to deal with. But that's brought on by myself. If I keep my weight low, that doesn't happen.
Okay. Well, I want you to think back to that time. And I know you have lots and lots of fond memories, but I wanted you to think back, what are 2 or 3 of the life lessons that you learned from that time? There are probably many, but what were the 2 or 3 key ones?
Well, probably when you're underwater for 90 days, probably one of the best ones was you learn to get along with people well. You learn to be accepting of other people and listen and pay attention. And where normally on the outside, you don't do that. You just go about your way, leaving in your wake whatever happens. But believe me, when you're that close to people for 3 months together in an enclosed tube with 150 people, you learn to get along well with other people, to go out of your way to get along with other people.
So getting along with other people, especially those you don't agree with, may not like, may not want to associate. Any other key life lesson from that period of time?
Do your work. Do your work. Everybody contributing to the whole. And when you're in that environment, everybody needs to participate. Everyone needs to know basic, like I said, damage control or different skills that you need to do to save the boats, to help each other out, protect not only yourself but other members of the crew.
So after 11 years, you went out, got the medical discharge, full disabled veteran. Then what? What happened? What did you do after the Navy?
Well, I'd always been kind of a sales guy, and involved in sales from the time I was a little kid, selling fruitcakes to pay for my trip to Europe or other things like that. So when I first came out of the Navy, I took a small company, a small 8A company, set-aside company, and I took on their sales company called AST.
And before you go any further, sorry to interrupt, what is a set-aside company for those of the listeners who may not know?
So that's typically a minority-owned company. Could be a woman, could be Afro-American, in that case it was, that has set aside certain contacts by the federal government that are set aside just for small businesses. So I did that, and I had a woman who took me under her wing, Pam Braden, who is now a big deal with some of the largest companies in the country. And she taught me how to do government sales and the process for doing government sales. And since I had a knack for sales already, combined with my interest in what she taught me, I've been very successful in that. I've done multiple billions of dollars worth of sales over the years, a variety of different voice, video, data, multimedia, security, technology, if you will.
So you've worked for a number of different companies, as you've mentioned, over the years, doing a variety of different things. Some of the firms I have seen on your LinkedIn profile were Shiricon, Anon, I believe it is. If I probably pronounced them incorrectly. VSE Corporation, NetPlus, Comdex, and one of the latest one was Jacobs. So you served for a number of different things, but you eventually specialized in 1 or 2 areas. Even though you started with this, but you specialized in 1 or 2. And what were 1 or 2 of the areas that you specialized in your career, in the area of business development?
Telecommunication towers in particular. Those towers you see up on the side of the road, those cost anywhere between $2 and $4.4 million a piece without any equipment on them, just the tower themselves. And I basically became an expert on the whole process of getting those. And then once you've got a tower, what goes on it, because there are multiple companies that may have things hanging on it, if you will, everything from your cell phone to radio equipment, etc.
How did you wind up getting into that particular niche and not, general communication equipment? Do you remember how that process all occurred?
Not to sound too straightforward, but it was mean time to money. I knew that if I sold those the rewards for doing those, it seemed like a good path. Also, one of my favorite contracts was with the National Park Service. So not only was I dealing with the towers and stuff, I got to visit 51 of the 100 and some national parks I got to visit as part of work. So somebody else was paying for it on their dime, and I got to go to these sites and spend as much as a week at some of the different national parks. And I think total I got to 51 of them.
Cool. That's fantastic. So we'll hold off on the national park question a little bit later. But thinking about your time at these various companies, I should say, what were one or two of the lessons learned that you learned there? I mean, you talked about the lessons that you learned while you were in the Navy. Everyone's got to pull together. You got to for the betterment of the sub, that you've got to do the best job that you can, do your job, do it right. But over the time, as you worked for these various companies, what were some of the lessons that you learned in business?
I think it strengthened the lessons that I talked about previously. In fact, those relationships and the value of your word being your bond and people being able to depend on you if you said something or did something, whether it was something small or funding a large project, either one. I think the same traits, only just at a larger scale.
Okay. And the word is your bond thing. A lot of people don't talk about that. I think older folks talk about it more than younger folks. But can you talk a little bit about that and what experience you might have had, or is there an example? And I know I'm just pulling this one out, an example you might want to share about the whole word is your bond thing.
Every project, I don't care what it is, has problems or has hang-ups or has something that doesn't happen. The equipment doesn't arrive on time or there's some delay for some reason. And if you don't work together to come up with a common solution, then you're going to have more problems. So that word is your bond type of thing, and living up to that, it just grew stronger in my professional life, even once I was out of the service and past growing up, being able to have people depend on what I said I was going to do. And if I said I was going to do something, good, bad, or indifferent, I did it.
I think that's the main thing. Your word is your bond. People will get to know you that if you tell the truth that you're going to do this and you do it, because over time, at least I've seen where I worked at a large international bank for 28 years. I remember one particular manager, this manager, their word, they would say they do it and they never do it, or they do something totally opposite. After a while, people just got to realize that it didn't matter what the manager said. It wasn't going to get done. Things weren't going to come to fruition.
Well, yeah, in fact, going back and reinforcing that a little bit, you can't expect other people to do things unless you're willing to do them yourself. And being able to lead by an example and by being able to show that you do what you say you're going to do, then you can hold other people responsible for that expectation. Although it doesn't always come true, at least you go at it with that attitude, which is a positive attitude to try and get things accomplished and work together with people.
I think that other point you've just brought up, which is, if you expect others to do it, you should be able to do it yourself, or at least have done it yourself. I think that's a very, very important point to make, which I don't think a lot of managers get or understand, that if you're going to be in charge of training or you're going to be in charge of sales, you actually have to have sold products. You have to have been successful in selling. You actually have to have been good in training or whatever it is. I remember I was asked to run a help desk, and damn it, the first 2 weeks I sat on that help desk before any of my team got on it, so that I understood, although 2 weeks is not a huge amount of time, it gives you a pretty good idea of what to expect and what your staff will expect?
I had the pleasure of sitting on the board of directors for a couple of companies, commercial companies, and within about 10 minutes, I can look at their P&L, the profit and loss statement, and listen to what they're saying is going behind it. And I can tell whether they're on the right path or not just by comparing those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it comes down to, are they meeting the goals, the written goals they had established, and are living up to what they said they were going to do? Because if there's not, there, you need to dig in and you're going to find more. And once you start peeling back the onion, it doesn't get any prettier sometimes.
So I didn't realize that you sat on a number of boards of directors. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. What was your experience like sitting on boards of directors? I'm assuming the boards didn't meet every day, of course. They met once a month, once a quarter, whatever the case might be. But what was your experience like sitting on boards of directors for people who have never sat on them? Because, of course, we see lots of stuff on TV, which TV doesn't necessarily equate to real life. So what was your experience like?
I've had some good experiences, and it was a learning experience as well. I learned more, enjoyed doing that because you learn even more about things, particularly in the telecom and IT world, and with one printing company that I work with.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a whole different side of the business where I was on the side of a group of people who were doing printing. Now I was on the side of the people that take those printed work and do things with it or have actions that come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it really gave me a fuller picture of the whole thing, as well as got me to understand the finances.
Okay. Let's just shift gears for a little bit. I want to talk about the national park a bit, and I want to go back to business. So you said, one of the great things about one of the great perks about selling telecom towers is that you in this particular area had the ability to visit 51 different national parks. Tell us, what was your favorite? Or the top two? If you can't just choose one, what were the top two and why were they your top ones?
Boy, that's a tough one because there's so many good ones. Shenandoah is one of the largest and biggest, at least in this area, in the D.C. area. Mm-hmm. And being able to go up and down the Shenandoah National Park and know whether it was park rangers or park police, and know some of the people there and make their acquaintance, get an understanding of how the park came about, mm-hmm. how the land was acquired, what was involved in it, mm-hmm. as well as I've always been kind of a student of history, so I enjoyed that anyway. That's part of it, that whole infrastructure of understanding it and how they came. And, we're one of the few countries in the world to have a system like that, where we have all these national parks that are mostly free for us to go to and for our kids and grandkids to go to take a look at and learn about our history.
Mm-hmm. And of the national parks, which one do you think is the most underrated of the ones that you visited? There are lots of parks and people will go, oh, we went to the Yellowstone, we went to the Grand Teton, we went to this one, we went to that one. But there are parks that are kind of underutilized, kind of hidden gems. Is there one that you would say to people, if you haven't been to this one, go to that one?
Idaho Falls definitely be one. And there's some parks, and I'm trying to remember the names of them out west in Arizona, where they've got these beautiful all there is different rock formations, but they're gorgeous and they go on for miles and miles. Those are ones I'd take a second to look up and recommend people go look at.
Okay. So let's focus back onto business now, and that is, I looked into your LinkedIn profile carefully, and one of the things that was consistent for many, many years was something called TAPSEC Consulting. I guess it's your business. Can you tell a little bit about TAPSEC and why did you establish it and what was the goal of it?
The first thing and most important, TAPSEC, is the name of my two children.
Okay.
TJ and Philly Security, TAPSEC. And I named it after my two kids. And basically, that was important to me. Even to this day, I still do occasional pieces of work under that name. But it was a chance to acknowledge them and make them feel part of what I was doing. Well, why is he always going here? Why is he going there? Well, he's working on TAPSEC. And of course, that helped fund their college and some other things too. So That's really it, and that's why TAPSEC was the name I chose for it.
Okay. And what did TAPSEC focus on? Did it focus on any particular thing? I know we talked in the past about what you do and how you do it. Can you maybe tell our listeners a little bit about TAPSEC, not just simply how you got the name for it, but what did you do?
Well, basically a lot of engineering design build projects, whether they were for towers or communication centers or 911 centers. I did a lot of 911 centers out on the West Coast for everything from San Francisco up and down the border with people. People don't realize 911 centers are really funded off your cell phone is basically the way they're funded. So there's a lot of money out there, and to put that money to good use in communities to help make them safer and stronger or make the response time quicker for ambulance and stuff. That's kind of a whole subset of the telecom world.
Okay. And thinking back over your business, what was probably the biggest success that you had? If you had to say, yeah, I had a lot of successes. I had a huge amount in sales, but if you say, this is the one, I always remember this one.
Well, I think Fort Meade, Lake Meade, out in Nevada is one of the sites. I did altogether probably $15.5 million worth of projects over multiple years out there. In fact, on my LinkedIn, you'll see me standing in a red jacket in front of Lake Meade, where you can see it in the background and stuff. And that whole project over multiple years, probably 10, 11 different projects altogether, probably about $15 million worth of work. If I pick one body of work to kind of represent what I did, that would kind of be it.
And so as we've talked about business and et cetera. Well, where does the future hold for you? Where do you go from here?
Well, I'm actually in the process of getting ready to retire, and so I'm starting to take steps to move into retirement. What I found, though, is I announced about 2 months ago I was going to retire. Bam, bam, bam. I started getting contacted by people who wanted help with particular projects, and so it allowed me to be picky about what projects, but I've taken on some new projects that kind of have delayed my retirement a little bit, but they're projects that either I feel because of their nonprofit status or because of the communications work that they would do and the benefit to the public, I enjoy doing them. So I still keep myself involved in those.
Excellent. So let me take this opportunity to say thank you, Tom, as we close out this first part of the interview. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, sir.
I hope that you have enjoyed part 1. In the next episode, Tom will talk about his membership with the Lido Civic Club. If you're interested in being on this podcast, please feel free to contact me at ciaodmv@gmail.com. That's ciaodmv@gmail.com. And please remember, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, and or share with a friend. This is Joseph Barone, your host, signing out. Ciao for now.